I love Bitcoin.
Manipulating the supply of money has short-term and long-term consequences. In 1913, bankers and politicians decided that it was in the country's best interest, and theirs, to have a permanent central bank. They created the Federal Reserve. Among its jobs, expand or contract the supply of a single national currency, the Federal Reserve note. The dollar was tied to gold, and strategic control of it would avoid booms that lead to busts. At least that was the plan. Then came 1929. The Great Depression would have a profound effect on monetary policy worldwide.
I shall ask the Congress for the one remaining instrument to meet the crisis: broad executive power.
Soon, the Fed had printed nearly all the money it legally could to pump life back into the economy. It needed gold to fire up the mint. So in 1933, President Roosevelt issued a controversial executive order, forcing all U.S. citizens to sell their gold to the Federal Reserve at a fixed price, or go to prison. In 1971, President Nixon settled the matter. He severed United States currency from the gold standard.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
Never again could anyone legally demand U.S. government gold in exchange for paper dollars. For better or worse, the dollar was now backed solely by the full faith and credit of the United States government. The wealthiest nation the world had ever known would bet its future on a single word: trust.
What is the wealth of the nation? Well, the wealth of the nation is a gigantic hole of money that we owe to the rest of the world that is never going to be paid back.
Today, the United States pays more than $400 billion in interest to its creditors every year. When a government spends more money than it collects in taxes, it simply borrows more, or it creates more. At one time, every piece of paper money was backed by gold. Remember, for every $20 bill, there was $20 worth of gold in a government vault. Not anymore. Today, governments create currency by first creating bonds or treasury bills. These bonds are sold in the market, generating funds for the government that issued them. Large banks buy U.S. bonds to flip them, selling them to the Federal Reserve at a profit. This is the magic money machine. You see, the Fed is America's central bank, but it doesn't have any money. No cash on its balance sheets. When a bank buys a bond and takes it to the Federal Reserve, the Fed simply says, "Thank you, Mr. Banker. Here's the principal and some profit." New money isn't exchanged. It simply appears on the bank's accounts. Magic. For 100 years and counting, the precise mechanisms of these bond purchases have remained a secret. Here's where it gets really interesting. The Federal Reserve is not a government agency. It's a private entity, and its shareholders are banks which earn a dividend. As much as $80 billion per year total are paid out to some of the very same banks that sell the government debt to the Fed. Which banks? Don't even bother asking. That's also a secret. In other words, the magic money machine answers to no one. The Fed also sets the bar for how much interest you pay for a car, home, or business loan. Manipulating the supply of money has short-term and long-term consequences. Central banks aim to create new money carefully, strategically, and very, very slowly. Releasing more money into the economy causes prices to rise, ideally by 2% every year. That's supposed to foster economic growth. But 2% inflation means the buying power of one cash dollar in your pocket today will be 98 cents next year, and less nearly every year to come.
Since 1913, when the Federal Reserve took over the United States dollar, we've seen that the United States dollar has decreased in value 98%. Inflation is a far higher tax because on your income you pay it just once. If inflation is 2%, you're paying a 2% tax on your net worth every single year, your net worth held in currency.
So, what does that mean? If you earned $1 in 1913, you could buy 16 loaves of bread. Today, $1 barely buys you one. That's not a quaint notion of how cheap things used to be. It's proof that the value of your cash is slowly withering away. That $1 invested at 2% in 1913 would now be worth $7.24. More than 600% return versus a near total loss.
The U.S. dollar has gone from being worth $1 to now being worth about 4 cents. So that's, 96% of its original value. And it's a direct result of government control.
Governments don't create money from thin air all alone. You play a key role in the magic money machine.
It's not really the central banks that are the problem. I mean, they're part of the problem, but the real problem is that we've given the power to create money to the same banks that caused the financial crisis.
We put our paychecks and savings into a bank account and draw from it as we need it. The banks are custodians of our money. Right? Wrong. It is now the property of the bank on their balance sheets. They can do just about anything they want with it. For example, create new money. Here's how. Your bank account shows $100, but the bank only holds $3 and loans $97 to Bob to buy something. In the bank's computers, you still have $100 in your account, but Bob now has $97 of new virtual money in his account. Just digits on a computer screen. There's no cash, no gold, or anything else backing up the new numbers in Bob's account. Just his promise to pay it back. This is new money created as debt. When those $97 are spent, say in a shop, the shop owner deposits into another bank, and it is lent out again, and again, and again. And each of these people have numbers in their accounts showing that they own this money. So your original $100 has multiplied. Now there are over $3,300 in the system. This process of loaning out far more money than a bank actually has as cash on hand is called fractional reserve banking.
In the UK, 97% of the money that exists is just numbers in the computer system, and those numbers are created by the banks.
Banks earn untold billions in interest every year by creating and lending virtual money. What's more, banks don't even need your deposit to create new money. If they consider someone credit-worthy for a loan, they can put new magic money into his or her account and start charging interest.
So reporters talk about Bitcoin as though it's the first digital currency. But actually we use digital currency every time you make a transaction through internet banking or through your bank card. Actually, it's not even just digital currency, it's digital currency that is created by the banks, essentially out of nothing.
In other words, all new money is debt. This is the part of money creation that isn't taught in economics class. Money in paychecks, bank accounts, 401ks, that loan to Bob, credit card debt, your home loan, all began life as virtual money created by the banks. The entire system is based on trust. Trust in the bank's solvency. Trust in the debtor's ability to repay their debt. If all bank customers demanded just 3% of their deposits right now in cash, this run on the banks would reveal the truth. Almost none of that paper currency you think is in your bank account exists. It never did. History teaches that the most revolutionary and disruptive innovation nearly always comes from the fringe, not from corporate cubicles. True innovators see the world differently. They see the big picture, creating new products and entire systems that lead to new industries. Steve Jobs called them the square cogs in round holes.
It's unsurprising that new innovations always come from a niche group of early adopters, because it is inherently very hard for many people to realize the benefits of new technologies. In 2011, most Bitcoin community people were either people from the technology space, the geeks and hackers, or people from the traditional financial industry. There are even some bankers and hedge fund traders using Bitcoinica at that time as well, which was really surprising to me.
A radical new idea is often met with skepticism, ridicule, even hostility from those who stand to lose the most from its success. Case in point, the automobile. In the late 19th century, Carl Benz and others built the first cars, contraptions that could threaten the stagecoach and railroad industries. These self-propelled vehicles, or road trains, would certainly scare horses, injure people, and damage roads. Cars, the railroad barons said, were just too dangerous. And to protect us, they used their power to pass a law in 1865. It required every automobile in England to observe a 4-mile-per-hour speed limit and to be operated by a crew of 3, a driver, an engineer, and a flagman. This heroic flagman walked in front of the car to warn fellow citizens of the coming danger. The railroad tycoons, the lawmakers, the self-appointed gatekeepers used regulation to stifle innovation. But they didn't invent the flagman. He's been around for a long time. For centuries, very few could read. Books were copied by hand. The people in control, political and religious leaders, wanted to keep it that way, and they greeted Johann Gutenberg's printing press with licensing laws, publishing bans, taxes. In some parts of the world, printing was a crime punishable by death. After all, they were just protecting us from dangerous ideas. Before the printing press, there were an estimated 30,000 books in all of Europe. 50 years later, there were 10 million. As Gutenberg's invention flourished, the Dark Ages withered. Progress couldn't be stopped. But the flagman never stops trying. His masters set him loose on each of these innovations because they threatened someone's profits, someone's control. But remember, this is a story about money. What if a technological innovation allowed anyone in the world to be their own bank? To create a currency free from taxes and banking fees?
Who is Archimedes? Who is Euclid? We don't know. We don't know if Euclid was one person or multiple people. And you know what? It doesn't matter. Euclidean geometry works whether I know who Euclid was or not, whether Euclid was a moral and good person or whether he was a corrupt plutocrat and a bastard. Science and mathematics have essential truth that stands alone, irrespective of its inventors and irrespective of their motives. Well, Bitcoin is a system based on mathematical truths, and these mathematical truths stand alone. We can read the source code in Bitcoin and understand it, and it will be true whether Satoshi Nakamoto is a man, a woman, a collection of individuals, a government agency, or aliens from the future. Bitcoin is digital currency and computer software.
Capital B Bitcoin is the shared code that creates a global payment network using computers connected to the internet. Bitcoins are virtual currency, digital money created, stored, and exchanged on that network. But unlike virtual dollars created by a banker, this new currency was created with math by an anonymous inventor. Bitcoin is an open-source software protocol like much of the code supporting the internet and email. Open source means anyone, everyone, can use the protocol. No one person or company can control it. Every change to the software is public, open, and transparent. The code was first developed by Satoshi. Then there were dozens, now hundreds, of programmers constantly collaborating to improve Bitcoin's features and security. So what makes Bitcoin a breakthrough? It tackles an ancient human dilemma and solves a computer science problem. Any shared information or data can be flawed, corrupted. Anything can be faked. How do we know that what we're receiving can be trusted?
In our traditional mindset, it's very important to know who is behind this currency because their reputation is significant in knowing that our funds and the true wealth is actually safe.
In finance, we rely on trusted third parties like banks, credit card companies, remittance services. They keep track of money as it moves from one account to another, and they charge us handsomely for it. We trust that their digital ledgers of credits and debits balance. A financial system that cuts out these middlemen could be faster, cheaper, and more secure. But Bitcoin is digital. Music and movies are easily pirated, copied, stolen. How can a digital currency retain value if anyone can make 1 million copies? The answer is at the core of Satoshi's invention. A Bitcoin is not a file on a computer. It's an entry in the publicly distributed database called the blockchain. Just as the Medici kept a ledger of credits and debits, today's banks record each transaction as a plus and minus in their ledgers. Now we call them databases. Bank accounts are replaced by a digital wallet that you alone control. Bitcoin's ledger is the blockchain, a record of every Bitcoin in existence and every Bitcoin transaction ever made. It always balances because no Bitcoin ever leaves it. When a Bitcoin is sent from one digital wallet to another, what they are really sending is control over that part of the database. Code that is a unique key for the new owner. As the network processes transactions, it constantly synchronizes the one ledger across the global network. Each computer or Bitcoin miner has a complete and identical copy. And because the blockchain is public, it cannot be controlled by any one person or computer. Owners of the Bitcoin mining computers are rewarded with new Bitcoins for processing transactions and keeping the network secure. In other words, the Bitcoin network replaces banks and bankers. Today, the combined computing power of this global network is greater than the 500 biggest supercomputers combined, times 10,000. And because every transaction is verified and recorded by the network, a Bitcoin cannot be forged. Digital currency cannot be debased with cheap metals or printed by the billion at will. Too much currency can unleash a monster, skyrocketing prices, trillion-dollar bills that can't buy a loaf of bread.
There's a big movement in the U.S. demanding that the Fed be audited so we can find out what they're doing. Nobody really knows how many dollars are in existence, for example. Ben Bernanke created several trillions of dollars over the last several years, but nobody really knows where they landed.
At any time, for any reason, the central banks can print as much money as they want. They call it fancy things like quantitative easing. And when they do that, it makes the dollars or euros or yen that you and I have worth less. So if the world starts using Bitcoin as their currency, it can't be controlled by central bankers or politicians.
Remember, central banks create money to boost the economy and try to pull it back out before inflation heats up. But no one knows how much magic money global banks are creating to boost their profits with questionable loans.
Bitcoin is completely the opposite. It's totally transparent. You know exactly how many exist.
The computer code behind Bitcoin has a built-in brake pedal, cutting the creation of Bitcoins in half every 4 years. This ensures a transparent, controlled scarcity, and ultimately limits the total number of Bitcoins to 21 million. No lobbyist, no politician, no banker can create more, or change the mathematical rules dictating their creation.
Advancing accountability. And that's one of the things I think is most exciting about Bitcoin and the technology behind it, is not so much that it will supplant the dollar or that it will supplant government itself, but that all of a sudden there's a competitor to government, and that government itself now needs to look over its shoulder more than it did.
This new digital currency can be purchased online with a credit card or in person with cash. And it has the 5 key characteristics of money. In the US, 2/3 of in-person sales are done with debit or credit cards. That plastic is a 60-year-old technology, created by a middleman, never designed for the internet. Each transaction requires personal data, like your name and address. Credit card databases are regularly hacked, with fraudulent purchases charged to your account. Criminals buy and sell stolen credit cards by the thousands in dark corners of the internet. In some parts of London, 1/3 of all online credit card transactions are fraudulent. A Bitcoin purchase is done for pennies, but there are no protections. If you lose your passwords or are fooled into paying the wrong person, you can never get your money back. It is like digital cash. For a seller, this means no chargeback risks. For an e-commerce company like Expedia or Overstock, cutting credit card fees can double their profit margin.
You could not miss the point more effectively than by thinking of Bitcoin as a currency and payment network that will make shopping easier for the first world. Bitcoin is about everything else, everywhere else.
There are 2.5 billion people without a bank account. With Bitcoin, a mobile phone with an internet connection is now a bank with access to the global marketplace.
What happens when Bitcoin services and infrastructure and Bitcoin wallets and payment processors start going into these countries? These people will be able to gain benefits from trade where they could not previously. These people will be able to send money home, international remittance, which is one of the major pain points of the current financial system.
Yeah, if I send $100, with banks it's going to cost me 20%, Western Union is going to cost 10%, other options that are competing with Western Union is still going to be about 5%, and if you are sending to really remote areas, it's going to be anywhere between 15 and 30%.
So in terms of money remittances, it's going to be a game changer using Bitcoin. You do not need a bank account. You just need internet connection and a wallet to get set up. It's a tool to give people an access into the global ecosystem and give them a promise for an economic future, and specifically provide a way for them to not be dependent on a government that could shut down their bank accounts or even could go into their bank accounts and take out finances.
An international wire transfer can take up to 4 days. Yet the internet allows us to instantly and globally share text, pictures, videos, anything digital. Why not money? Money, which we now know only exists as digits in a bank's database.
With Bitcoin, you can send $1 or $1 million worth of value anywhere in the world. You can do it for free, or you pay the Bitcoin network fee, which is still just around a penny. And there's nothing that the big banks or politicians can do to stop it.
A cryptocurrency that can only be created and transferred with computer networks may be the next step of the digital revolution.
A lot of people want to criticize Bitcoin for being used for illegal things or illicit things, but if you look at it, the most popular currency in the entire world for doing bad things is the US dollar.
If you think of Bitcoin as a platform instead of a currency, then you really begin to see the potential it has.
The ledger, which cannot be forged, it cannot be changed, and is universally accepted, is genius. There will be Bitcoin technology forever, and it'll have applications for years to come.
Creating a secure global payment system may just be the beginning. Patents, contracts, land titles, proof of ownership can be baked into Bitcoin, securely held in the public ledger.
I read up more about Bitcoin, I played with the source code, I built some things that I realized this is actually a very, very powerful protocol. It's not just a currency, but it's actually programmable money.
The digital age has fundamentally changed the world. We have embraced digitized music, film, medical records, communications, the internet. The free exchange of information and currency can fuel revolutions, help in a disaster. But our money is shackled to the 20th century, manipulated by governments and banks. The champions of Bitcoin ask us to imagine payments without a middleman, investments without a broker, loans without a bank, insurance without an underwriter, charity without a trustee, escrow without an agent, betting without a bookie, record keeping without an accountant, global, secure, nearly instant, and free. Is it fantasy or the future of money and commerce?
I love Bitcoins. I'm really into Bitcoin. If you don't know what a Bitcoin is, right, usually the way people describe it is digital cash. It's money for the internet. People are like, oh, I love my bank. I'm like, really? You ask a banker, you know what's 2 + 2? He's like, well, I can tell you, but there's a fee. Now, Bitcoin is a new technology. I like to say it's banking light. All of the convenience, none of the evil.